I'm Tessa Ripley, and I'll be presenting a cultural cascade, utilizing theater in order to develop and construct cultural memory. Miss Saigon. 6. Hamilton. Evita. Chances are you've heard of at least one of these 4 highly popular Broadway shows. Each of these 4 titles seemingly don't hold any correlation, but looking closer, one can see that they each have an overarching theme, a modern interpretation of the past. Why? To instate a connection between historical and cultural groups. In a historical sense, theater is a creative outlet that introduces a fresh new perspective on historical events, therefore initiating this connection to the past, which in turn establishes a fundamental human need, belonging. Therefore, the introduction of cultural memory and collective nostalgia are introduced. According to Johann Norberg in False Nostalgia, collective nostalgia is the emotional attachment to collective cultural identities. This is what my group was like, or this is what my group endured in the past. It's a true sense of strength for deepening cultural awareness and memory. In short, theater opens up the past. But to understand this connection, we first have to understand what cultural memory actually is. Well, according to National Geographic Education, cultural memory is the constructed understanding of the past that is passed from one generation to the next through text, oral traditions, monuments, rites, and other symbols. So, expectably, cultural memory instates values, histories, continuity, identity, belonging, and connection. Theater, comparably, brings these processes to life. Through performing and spectating alike, actively participating in these historical shows drives the need for connection between groups and people, therefore instating values, histories, continuity, identity, belonging, and connection. As Lydia Kapusheveska-Drakulewska, professor of poetics at SS Cyril and Methodist University, stated, theater, on the other hand, is a multi-dimensional play with memory. It is an emblem of a certain culture and of the overall blending of various discourses within it. Leading us to the question, how do historical theater performances preserve cultural identity and memory? But to understand this cultural identity and belonging, we first have to look at what a flourishing sense of one looks like. Well, people with this heightened sense of identity tend to have more comfort within their culture and have a stronger sense of community, values, and traditions. For example, in the Maori culture, oral tradition is their rite of passage. They tell their stories through oral tradition in order to connect with ancestors in the past. Brought into oral tradition, much like performances, these theatrics are a connection to the past and provide new meanings and new contexts, much like in theater. On the contrary, when this prophecy disappears, negative mental health consequences, social cohesion, alienation, and cultural ethnocide, or the destruction of cultural ethnicities, occurs. The steps towards cultural assimilation and alienation start with the outside view, leading to shame for one's cultural identity, and therefore leading to complete cultural estrangement. So, as a result, finding new perspectives through theater becomes a relevant and valuable topic of discussion. But how does one accomplish this? Well, performers use unsuspecting and common necessities like perfume, makeup, and histories in order to reflect cultural authenticity and confidence. This authenticity plays a crucial role in strengthening cultural memory. It becomes a tangible and symbolic marker in order to instate cultural profundity and cultural awareness. For example, Ariel Stachel, actor who won a Tony Award in 2018 for his outstanding performance in Broadway's The Band Visit, underwent much ostracization and alienation for his cultural identity, thus leading him to become discouraged and lose this key identity overall. But after booking The Band's Visit, his whole perspective of his identity shifted and therefore strengthened. Through his performance, the role of cultural theater was disclosed by changing his sense of self, cultural pride, and how he viewed the world in general. In his words, "This is the power of theater and art at its best, building bridges for peace and understanding." Through the magic of theater, history doesn't just remain in the past. It becomes this living and breathing thing that helps step forward and understand it anew. This connection to the past becomes apparent through constructing narratives, increased visibility, and symbolic representation. This does so through the process of classical reception. Classical reception encourages the study of both the past and present worlds, thus becoming a coping strategy of such. And then it empowers performance and initiates collective identity and nostalgia. One notable example of this is in the critically acclaimed musical Hamilton, written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Said to be a testament to the power of art and the importance of representation in theater, Hamilton is one of our generation's most popular musicals. It drew future generations in with its deep themes and relevant history, thus drawing to the contemporary score by reimagining the memory of American history. Actors do so through the method. The method trains actors to use their physical, mental, and emotional selves in order to construct a character. This stresses the way in which actors fire their imagination through culture. This individual and historical authenticity drives for the embodiment of cultural necessities and belonging, and therefore initiates cultural memory and remembrance within performers. For example, Cynthia Erivo, award-winning British actress, portrays character Celie in The Color Purple. To enhance her character Celie, Cynthia Erivo thought of the reason behind her pace, the reason behind her makeup and clothing choices, her gestures in space, and if she was escaping something culturally, to enhance the themes of abuse, sexism, and racism. It reflected her cultural awareness and confidence greatly. So, how can theater open up the past? Well, through these methods of performance, actors are able to authentically represent a character through cultural authenticity and emotion, thus fostering the sense of cultural pride and continuity. Overall, theater becomes this theatrical bridge to the past by fostering a sense of authenticity and continuity. Therefore, initiating personal and collective cultural memory. It is a reminder that the past isn't just something to be remembered. It's something to be lived, understood, and celebrated in the performances that shape our shared futures. As Arthur Miller, 20th century playwright, essayist, and screenwriter stated, the mission of the theater, after all, is to change, to raise the consciousness of people to their human possibilities. Thank you.
Okay, you can go to your questions. All right. What evidence did you gather that you didn't include, and why did you choose not to include it?
Well, when talking with my teacher, Ms. Brunel, she recommended to me that I dive into solutions instead of conclusions. So I started divulging into that, and I started researching into that and how the reason behind Lin-Manuel Miranda creating Hamilton. I started researching things like that and how he wanted to culturally represent, and because he basically he wanted to have this representation of immigration, but I chose not to represent this in my presentation because I feel like it wasn't as connected to the topic I was hoping. I think it was more like theater in general and not the cultural and identity aspects to it.
Okay, good. And your second question, what additional questions emerged from your research and why are these questions important?
Thank you for your question. Some additional questions that emerged from my research were definitely questions regarding identity in general, not so much cultural identity, and I wanted to represent how like personal identity and like in addition to cultural identity affected theater and how it fostered this sense of history and representation, and I think it was really important for me to dive into personal and cultural in addition to the historical senses.